Yeah, I considered it. Yeah, no.
But yeah, kia ora everyone, and thank you so much for coming along tonight. And a big thank you to Claire Keeling from Ekos, who will be facilitating this workshop webinar this evening, talking about how we can measure, reduce and offset our carbon emissions. Claire has done a lot of work with businesses recently in this space and has previously presented to the Climate Forum specifically with a focus on businesses. So this evening we'll be talking a little bit more about households, community groups, schools, individuals, that kind of thing. So throughout, if you have questions that come up, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and we can address those sort of as we go through. You can also use the raise a hand function if you wanted to sort of say something sort of then and there. We'll keep an eye on that. And aside from that, over to you, Claire.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So I am going to do my best. We're going to kind of work with the mood of the room here. I will try and, what I'm going to focus on is looking at lifestyles first. And I think that I want to focus on that one because of what Jessie said earlier. I have done a business-focused carbon footprint measurement workshop, and I'm really happy to go into that in a bit more detail if people would like me to, especially our carbon light calculator that we have online. So let's just get started and see where we end up. Also just touching on the schools. I haven't got any slides on the schools, but again, if people actually have a real interest in going into that a bit, I'm really happy to share the experience of where Ekos has got to with that. So again, maybe I'll read the room there on that one. So I'm just going to share my screen. And that does the button, share. And just bear with me one moment, it's just loading up. Okay, so I think you can see my screen. All good, Jessie? Yeah, sweet. All right. So here's just kind of the outline of what I wanted to cover. I am going to give a brief intro into Ekos and our approach, kind of set within the scene. But I also just really want to recognise that I'm, in a sense, preaching to the converted here. I know nobody here is coming to this workshop going, what's climate change? So I'll try and not, dwell on those details for too long, but it's still important to kind of situate what this work is, I guess. So then, as I mentioned, I'll go into the lifestyle calculator, but very briefly touch on where you can find the Carbon Light Organisation calculator and the school calculator. There will be a carbon reduction piece as well. And lastly, offsetting. I think I've changed the words on the different slides, but I did actually have offsetting is not a dirty word. And so I'm here to try and explain a bit more about that today. And of course, Q&A at the end. Do feel free, if you have questions, as Jessie said, to raise your hand. I can't really see everyone right now, so Jessie, you might need to help me out there if anyone's got burning questions. So, as many of you will be aware, we do have this framework of the Sustainable Development Goals that were created in 2015. Now, this actually preceded the more famous Paris Climate Agreement. So if anyone hasn't heard about these before, I really encourage you to look them up. So 193 countries got together and recognised the interconnected crises we are facing as a planet. And to address these, the 2030 Transforming Our World agenda came up with 17 goals, which, if achieved, would put us on the pathway to a thriving, prosperous and sustainable planet. It is a 2030 agenda, as in it was recognised that these goals should be achieved by 2030. And goal number 13 there is a massive barrier to all of the other goals being achieved. And goal 13 is climate action. Oh, it's not letting me, hold on a second. There we go. So many in this sustainability world are really coining this decade the decade of action. And as I said before, it's really going to be the turning point that's going to steer us in the direction of a peaceful, prosperous, and thriving future for all beings on the planet. But the caveat there is if we take action now. And as almost all of us here today know, we are running out of time. And we have a problem. Our economy is based, and that global economy, that is based around burning cheap fossil fuels that create greenhouse gas emissions that accumulate inside our atmosphere, trapping heat and causing our planet's temperature to rise. Particular problem is that CO2 is cumulative and it stays in our atmosphere for hundreds of years, and that today we are locking in the warming of tomorrow. So the problem here is, and there's a lot of words on that page, don't worry, I can send these slides to you if you want them, but science isn't going to wait for politics, and I'll admit we're having, it does feel like the Titanic is turning right now, so we've got some real momentum building, both globally, nationally and locally, but the problem is we have a limited carbon budget, and I do think that this bathtub illustration is quite a handy way of thinking of it. So if we think of our 1.5 degree target as the rim of the bath, and those are the emissions pouring in, we do have a natural carbon sink at the bottom there, which is drawing the emissions out, but we also can see, well, I should say, there is a limit to how big that sinkhole can be made to be. So we really, really need to reduce the emissions, turn the tap off on the emissions that are pouring into the bath, but also maintaining and enlarging that sinkhole as much as is possible. So the kind of crux of all this is, we need a global transformation of how we do everything. And this isn't just about how we source and use our energy, it's about how we make food, transport, how we design our cities, our economies. And a really important thing that I guess I will loop back to at the end here when I get into the offsetting piece is that even if we stopped emitting today, completely went to zero, the world would keep warming because of the cumulative impact of CO2. So we need to bring the current parts per million back down to the safe operating space of 350, which means that nature-based solutions, solutions that are taking carbon out of the atmosphere still really need to be invested in, no matter what we do. And obviously we're not going to be at zero emissions tomorrow, and that's why I find this quote that really sums things up. So that was Professor Piers Forster, the co-author of the IPCC's 2018 report. We have to do everything, and we have to do it immediately. So words that you might be familiar with in climate space is mitigation, adaptation, resilience building, and that's what I'm thinking when I see this. So that does bring me to Ekos and introducing why we do what we do. So we're a social enterprise that takes a systems-based approach to protecting the climate, nature, and communities. So we have two pillars to our organisation: demand side, which works on emissions, and a supply side, which is all focused around removals. And what I mean by that really is that, so on the demand side, we work with businesses to help them transition to a low carbon and regenerative economy. And we do that by making carbon footprint measurement services affordable and accessible. And at the same time, we create demand for good carbon credits that are sourced from permanent restorative carbon forest projects that also have multiple co-benefits. So I know that's a mouthful, but it's really hard to simplify our organisation in any other way. So I didn't get to adjust my slide today, but I guess what I've explained to there in summary is both the emissions and the removal side. So we'll come back to this. At Ekos, we do have a mantra that's slightly in opposition to others. We say measure, offset, and reduce. And many others would say measure, reduce, offset. But I'll go into that again very shortly. these are the projects where we currently are issuing credits from. So the projects that people finance when they offset with us. Sorry, some of my language is still left over from a more business orientated slide. In my day-to-day, we work with businesses to help them go zero carbon or climate positive. Slightly different when we're dealing with lifestyles. We have a different certification, which is called carbon friendly. So that's what we'll be talking about today in terms of a lifestyle. But these projects, they stay the same. This is where we're issuing from. So Aotearoa and the Pacific. And those green dots are where we currently issue credits from. The orange dots are where we will be developing, and we are developing projects. So now we're going to have a quick look at the carbon lifestyle calculator. So day to day, we're dealing with businesses and working with them to produce ISO standard business operations measurements. But also on our website at ekos.co.nz, and I really encourage people to go have a look at that after this session. We have, our philosophy is all about, and always has from the very beginning, has been about lowering barriers to entry in this process. And because we know that knowledge is key here. So we have other things that we provide on our website, including a automated lifestyle calculator, a schools calculator, and also a brand new business light calculator. So the deal with these are that because they're online and auto-populating, they are somewhat limited. These are not ISO standard measurements. They kind of have to build in some assumptions. And, in an ideal world, if we had super techies working with us, maybe we would get into some further refined detail. But we are essentially a work in progress. And so just there'll be things you'll pick up on today and probably say, hey, why don't you measure that? And I'll probably say back to you, good question, I don't know. We could look into it, or there might be a reason why we can't, and why we can't automate it in the process. So it does mean, because you don't have an analyst working with you to get into the gritty details, it does mean it's a lower resolution footprint. But hey, it's kind of like, this is more about making a real evidence-based estimate. It's not about going, this is an exact science. And at the end, you do always get the option of pushing the offset button, supporting one of those projects that I've already mentioned, and you will get a carbon-friendly certification. So whether that's that's for a lifestyle, you'd get a carbon-friendly lifestyle, or carbon-friendly business light certification. Schools are slightly different. So yeah, I'm thinking I'll just keep going with the slides. Then I'm really happy just to have a pause. And if you think it'd be interesting, I can just jump on the website and navigate what this looks like. I'm assuming nobody came here today with all their data ready to go and plug in. And so I'll just continue speaking for now. So as you will know,
how do we play with it?
Have you? Ken? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
so
it's been interesting to see what goes on. Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Great. So how about we'll chat soon and get thoughts and ideas about it. I mean, I guess the whole idea here is really, you can't manage what you don't measure. I really think that's a great quote in this scenario for carbon, because we can't see it. And it's just a great place to start and get a feel for, everyone wants to reduce their impact in their lifestyle. How do you do it? So basically you go onto our website, click on the lifestyle calculator, and there you're going to have, and I encourage anyone to do this while I'm speaking, by the way, if you want to have a look yourself. You'll get the, what do you call it? A screen will pop up, and you will enter your information according to these activities that I'm going to run through. So in terms of electricity in your daily life, there's just some like really basic things. And I will just, the caveat here is this is kind of a real basic calculation. So in your household, you're going to have hot water heating. You're going to have heating for your house, so like a heat pump maybe. refrigeration and appliances. These are things that all are in our daily life. So to measure this, it's super simple. All you need are your electricity bills. Now, if you were a business, I'd be saying give them a call, get a report sent to you. But in terms of your, because you're, no, this works as well. Sorry, just trying to bring myself into the lifestyle world. Of course, you have a home electricity bill separate to your work. If you're like me, and it's tricky because I work from home, maybe you want to attribute 50% of that or 25%, the same amount that you do with your tax. Say, work it out that way. Apply a percentage, I guess is what I'm saying. You might have to do that off our screen. It doesn't give you that capability, but a little calculator will help you calculate that. So, yeah, because the way that you're going to reduce emissions will come back to, but I just wanted you to think about where electricity is being used in your household. So for fuels, this is similar. I am guilty of having an a gas heater in my house. I didn't put it in there. I moved into it and it's there. I use it in winter. And some people might have instant gas hot water heating. There's gas cooking for your stove and of course a barbecue. That's where I was thinking. You might have some other ideas. Of course, wood as well. Wood burners are really common. So that might be another piece of information that you're collecting for your lifestyle household emissions. On our calculator, we have diet emissions. This was, I really wanted us to include this because it's such an important part of people's lifestyles. And, we know that this is one of the areas where we as individuals can all make a difference. We currently rely on an American study, and that has broken it down in this way. We're kind of still shopping right now for the Ministry for the Environment hasn't got a number that we can rely on, and that's where we usually go for the emission factors that we use to calculate footprints. So if anyone comes across one that they think is really, really good and top notch, feel free to send it our way. But we currently use this as our measure. So it's an annual tonne emission that is released depending on your dietary choice. So waste, this is on our calculator, it's specifically waste sent to landfill. And so there's two ways of measuring that, although I'm just thinking out loud, I do think we only do kgs of waste on our calculator rather than litres. We're going to look at this calculator after this section because I think it would be handy for us to actually look at this together. So yeah, you're going to monitor this information by watching how much waste you put out. If it is true that we only do kgs, I encourage people to invest in a little luggage scale, and it's the kind of thing you can just measure before you put your bag out on the curb, or a little, a foot scale, one that you stand on. You can put your bag on there. It's just less precise. So depending on how deep you want to get into this, that's one way of doing it. Otherwise, if you put out a 120 litre bin every week, that's the other way. So flights and accommodation. Now, flights on our automatic calculator, this is one of the limitations of our automated calculator. If you were to come to us in a business measurement space, we would be going exactly into where you flew from and to. Unfortunately, in this case, we have to group it into a short haul flight, a medium, or a long haul flight. And so we'll go onto the calculator shortly, and we'll look at that and how that looks. Associated with flights is accommodation, and the country of where you stayed is actually really relevant. I mean, not that many people would have left New Zealand this year, but if you are staying in a hotel room in Australia, they use far dirtier electricity, and that's what impacts on those emissions. So in terms of where you're getting that information, I think most of us can agree that, you know, going down memory lane is a nice thing to do. It's just a matter of trawling through your Airbnb or whatever you use to book your flights, so your Visa card. Ooh. So last one here, and then we'll go have a look on the actual thing, is car use. So that should come as no surprise to people that that's one of the most significant emission points that we will have in our daily lifestyles. So there's two ways that we would measure that. So you can either keep all your receipts, add them up, and then add up all the litres of petrol or diesel you've used in the year. That is the most accurate way of doing this, I will add. And otherwise, because it's quite normal for people to not have done that, you might again take a bit of a trip down memory lane and work out how many kilometres you've travelled over the year using Google Maps. Now obviously that's going to be for me that's really easy because I don't drive much, and that's not because I'm an angel, it's just because I live in Nelson and I work in Nelson Central, so I can walk to work. So when I can actually usually think back in terms of how many trips I've done. But one thing to note is if you're going to do it this way, we do need to know what type and age of vehicle you're using and the relative vehicle size. So how big was your engine? So those are kind of the things that feed into that emission calculation. Worth mentioning, before we go into the reduction bit, I'm going to get us to jump on that calculator. You know, carbon measurement is definitely a journey. So by completing this the first time, you're probably not going to have perfect information, especially because in relation, if you think about that travel piece, you're going, oh, okay, you know, how many kilometers do I think I traveled this year? It's going to be an estimate. But if you set yourself up to monitor these things and you know exactly what it is you're measuring, next year you're going to actually have those systems set up. And like me the other day, I hired a car. I was down in Queenstown and I filled it up and I kept my petrol receipt because I knew that's something I'm going to come to and measure at the end of the year. So it's a journey, and one that we will all be working on continuously improving, especially also as information and other things we add new calculations to our calculator. Now I am going to share my screen again with you so that we can just contextualize that a little bit. So here's our website, and as I mentioned before, we've got this drop down here, our services. So just carbon calculators is where you would need to go. And what we do is we've got a whole list of carbon calculators here for you to look at in your own time. The business calculator light we can touch on, but this one, the one we've been discussing is the lifestyle calculator. So some essential bits of measuring a footprint is, you know, contextualizing that. Who's this measurement for? So we have yourself or your household. What is the measurement period? That's really important because especially if you're going to set yourself up for measuring this again the next year, you actually want a record of what you've measured already. I mentioned earlier your kilowatts. So the way this works is that you're going to punch in your numbers here. I really hope you don't use this much carbon in your daily life, but if you do, we need to talk. But as soon as you punch it in there, you actually get a footprint that comes out the bottom here, okay? So if at the end you don't want to offset, you know, just keep a note of what your emissions are. We're working towards improving this so that at the end it will present it, no matter whether you want to offset or not. It's just a bit of a work in progress, hoping that Christmas delivers for us. So here's your gas and here's your wood burner, how many cubic meters you're using. LPG cylinders for your barbecue or for your gas heating, the nasty things I use for my heating. Here's the dietary section. So this is how many people in your household are eating these diets. Yes, I was right. So we've only got kgs of waste sent to landfill here. So it's got a little tip. The average household sends 500 kg of waste to landfill a year. I always find that figure shockingly high. But, you know, I would suggest monitoring it for a couple of weeks yourself, like I said, with the luggage scale, and then you'll get a good idea of whether you're producing about the same every time. And we all have those once in a while, like maybe we're doing a clear out of the house, and maybe you want to pay special attention during that time.
I think the tool I used had it listed in litres of rubbish that you put out, how many litres
Yeah, okay.
rubbish bag was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was quite easy to do because
litres is easier to do. I will take notes here because it's been a while.
You know, because you're under sink.
Yeah.
Like 20 litres and your rubbish bag 65 litres, and
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it made it easy to work out.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Ken. I'll make that note. So now I mentioned flights and that limitation we have here. So as you can see, because we don't have a really clever mathematical computer in the background here, it's just how many domestic flights did you take? 4. Okay, you took that 1 flight to Australia. So it's kind of giving you a kind of an idea of what we determine a short haul flight here. And yeah, there's an option here of whether you'd like to include radiative forcing or not. There's an explanation of what that is. We're soon to be removing that because we've had a philosophical discussion about the fact that we shouldn't let people have the excuse not to account for radiative forcing. The reason why, so basically the science isn't exactly out on how to present that as a carbon dioxide equivalent, though they know that these chemicals and gases are having a global warming impact. So the fact that there is radiative forcing is not uncertain. It's just how to communicate it as a carbon dioxide equivalent that is uncertain. So anyway, far too much detail for you right now, but that will eventually be removed.
Yeah, with your international flights, I unfortunately don't get to travel to Europe every year. So there's quite a variation from one year to another. So I might go overseas once every 3 years or something, and it can be quite different to what I'm doing and why I'm over there. But yeah, and so that's going to be part of your natural ebb and flows of your emissions as well, right? So you might have a low emissions footprint this year because it wasn't the Europe travel year, but in 2 years' time you'll have that big bump, and that's kind of that's really normal for anybody who has family or has come from lives here, but their home is elsewhere. So that's just something that's just part of it. And I did wonder about if you're going somewhere that's like I've travelled in India, for example. I'm pretty sure the footprint of accommodation in India, especially when you're sleeping in the Sion slum at 25 cents a night, is going to be slightly different.
I think I agree. I have no idea whether we have an Indian. This is taken from, okay, interesting, let's have a look. So this is taken from MFE accommodation. So let's say 1 night in New Zealand. And so this tool's here for you just to play around with, right? You don't always have to do your lifestyle full carbon footprint, but if you just want to get an idea of, how much is it to stay a night in India? Actually, this is a good point though. It's probably based on hotels rather than that nuance that you're saying. Yeah. So in New Zealand, it's 0.582. If we change that to India, it's 0.673. So that'll be to do with the fact that they have a lot of coal and potentially gas. I know they have a lot of coal. So that'll be looking at hotels comparatively rather than, And here's and again another highlight of the nuance that's not being captured in this kind of a calculator, right? Okay, so we're down here. We're at the transport state part. Again, you know, selecting the size of your vehicle or type of vehicle. It looks like we've got a few more options than I even had on my slide, and how many kilometres you've travelled. So interestingly, also here that we don't have petrol or litres as an option, potentially for the reason I said before, people don't generally collect their invoices, but I kind of feel like we should have that because that wouldn't be too hard. So this is good for me. I don't know if this is good for you, but I'm getting a lot out of it. So we should improve these systems.
Yeah, another wee improvement there would be the inbuilt carbon of the vehicle. So if you're driving around in,
yeah,
you know, a 50-year-old vehicle, or you're getting a new one, you know, every 2 years, even if it's electric, it's probably going to have higher carbon built into it.
Yep, yep. And a rough understanding that I have of that is it's approximately 15 tonnes for an electric car and 12 tonnes embodied carbon for a fossil fuel powered car. But over the time of operation of its lifetime, obviously the fossil fuel car overtakes the electric car. Especially in New Zealand, that is, especially when we have high electricity, renewable electricity percentage. So, yeah. I mean,
but an older vehicle will have a lower built-in energy as well, because they just, you know, they're not as fancy.
Exactly. Okay, so I want to go on to the carbon reduction. Oh, does anyone else have any questions about that? Sorry. All pretty.
I'd like to know how you convert the waste into CO2. Like, I mean, not every waste is the same, and the lifestyle. Like, I live with some flatmates, and there are people that need new electronics all the time, and other people not. Others buy a lot of clothes and shoes and all that. I mean, that's all consumption, which is not in the calculator, but you have the waste, which is sort of a stand-in for CO2. So how do you convert waste into emissions?
Yeah, so what we do is we use emission factors from the Ministry for the Environment. These are all actually available on their website if you would like to visit their website, and they're reasonably limited at the moment, and I think this is something that's definitely going to improve over time. So the two categories they have is office waste emission factor and then a mixed waste emission factor. The office waste usually has a higher organic component. So when we're dealing with businesses, we'll talk to them about whether they're recycling and composting at their business. If they're not, I will assume that they have organic content in their bin. Therefore, they will always have the office waste emission factor. And I understand that on this calculator here, we've used the office waste one as well, just to be slightly more conservative, over conservative that is, in the emissions calculation. When we get to if I show you the emission reduction section, I guess I'll just explain the logic here as well a little bit. But does that kind of answer your question, Matthias? I mean, I know that what you're trying to say is, you know, there's a lot more detail we could go into here. You know, whether it's
No, it's appreciated. I mean, you know, so there are figures out there, and they will constantly improve, because otherwise lifestyle, like, I mean, if you know different people, they live completely differently, and just from their cars and their meat, and that's not all. I mean, there is sort of some general consumption that's going on, and that varies heaps between.
Yeah. I think even something we could do better in this one. There is a green waste emission factor, and there is there's an organic waste emission factor. So, you know, in textiles, I should say, like textile waste. So if you're somebody who engages in fast fashion and you're throwing out clothes, maybe you can actually account for that a bit better. I don't know people like that, but there must be people out there, because they say that's what people do, is they buy clothes and they throw them out. So it's bizarre to me, but great. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to sharing my screen. And there we go. So just the carbon reduction piece, again, I'm a little bit aware that I'm going to be talking to people who already know all of this stuff like 100 times over. But again, you know, once you've measured, it's really about, okay, well, there's my number for my, you know, I've got 5,000 kilowatts of energy use. Now, how do I bring that down to at least 4,500? Or for waste, you know, the waste you've sent to landfill, it was 10 kgs over the year. Can you get it down to 9 kgs over the year? You know, once you've got the numbers in front of you, you can actually start setting targets for your reduction. And that's why this measurement piece is so important. So electricity and gas with the lifestyle lens on, efficiency is really always going to be one of the main things we're looking at here. And also kind of the concept of prioritize electricity over fossil fuels when you can. These two points will be your kind of guiding principles. And I'm not an electrical engineer like Ken, so these are going to be very basic recommendations here, and maybe we get to engage in some interesting discussion afterwards. But you know, the home's insulation envelope, absolutely vital here. So we use energy with our heating and our air conditioning, usually because we haven't got, you know, we know in New Zealand we haven't built our homes very well. And so addressing what that insulation envelope is in your home is going to be one of the best things you can do, not only for saving carbon and saving money on power, but also for health. We know that a good ventilated and insulated home is good for health. And I'd even like just to pause there and say, all of these things have so many co-benefits, you know, which is why when we look at how we're going to tackle this beast of decarbonising our economy, there's such a great opportunity to just redesign and do things so much better than we've been doing lately, because we've really got ourselves into a bit of a hole, I think, in so many ways. So just coming back to this, you know, operating efficient appliances. So you'll all be familiar with the Energy Star rating that is given to appliances. If you are out there shopping for a new appliance, do your best to get the highest Energy Star rating. I think there's the Blue Star Energy tick for the absolute best practice. I'm not aware that has been removed, so look for that too. Refrigeration and heat pump maintenance. So I used to go around to sports clubs and basically do really low-level energy audits for them, and it was always the same stuff in every single community sports club around the country, which there's like 1,500 of, if not more. I might have the numbers wrong there. You know, old refrigeration units, heat pumps that, you know, got installed 10 years ago, but no one's cleaning them. You know, outside you've got those external fan units. You know, you need to grab a brush and wipe it down, make sure it's not getting dusty and overheating. Same with your refrigeration. So if you have your refrigeration in a really sunny kitchen and the sun is beaming on it all day, as you can imagine, is actually having to work double hard to maintain its temperature. Other bits, you know, I went down earlier, my dad's seals on his fridge, they're pretty gone. That means that the cool air will be escaping, again, making it work harder. So there's a lot of little tips and bits like that that you can pick up around how to make your home as energy efficient as possible. A fun fact that always has stuck with me is that turning appliances off, like your TV or laptop, can save 10% of the energy they would have been using in standby. And yeah, another one that I always enjoyed, because when we think of energy efficiency, we don't usually think about the water we're using, but that actually really, there's a real correlation there. So if you are using your shower and your water's coming out at 15 litres a second, you're actually going to be using a lot more energy to heat that water with your electric hot water cylinder. So getting your shower at a nice level, I think they say 7 litres per minute is the optimum balance for energy and water efficiency. So try for that. They have really fancy Methven shower heads that optimize the user experience while still keeping water levels low. I'm sure there's other brands that do it as well. I'm just aware of Methven. If you do have an old hot water cylinder in your cupboard, and also been going to quite a few homes recently and noticing, half of Nelson, or at least all of the houses I've seen recently, all have old hot water cylinders. So if that is old, putting a cylinder wrap actually reduces energy use by up to 40%, and lagging on the first 2 meters of the pipes will also reduce energy loss. I think it's 10% for those first 2 meters. So those things are really easy to buy from Bunnings, and they will pay back. And also, if you haven't checked your temperature, set it to 60 degrees, no higher. So that was a big mouthful, but there's, again, lots of things we could have said, but let's just look at diet. I know all of you know this. We need to eat less meat and less dairy. So hopefully you're all on your own journey in one way or another, but maybe by working on, if you're a meat lover this year, maybe for the next emission measurement, you're aiming to be just an average meat eater. Buying local where possible. Now, this isn't part of that calculation, but this is just more a general principle. Reducing the freight emissions of your food, that's going to help. It's also going to have the co-benefits of supporting your local economies. So the kind of slow food movement that was very popular, I think is going to be coming back, especially after this most recent COVID scare. And, another great thing here, and I love how they all interweave. I remember watching a documentary years ago when I was really into the zero waste movement. And it really stuck with me that if you just eat healthy, you will pretty much be there. So ignoring how they package up little, individual bananas or celery sticks in the supermarket, we usually produce nasty plastic waste when we buy processed foods, because that's how they give them and deliver them to us. So if you're eating healthy, as in you're eating fresh fruit and vegetables, preferably from your garden or a little bit from the supermarket, then actually you'll already be 70% of the way there on your zero waste mission. So it's kind of a nice way that correlates with reducing your waste impact. The hierarchy of waste, again, I know you all know it. I found this little diagram, which I thought Rethink was quite cool to have in there. The circular economy movement is well and truly alive and growing. Hopefully that's where we're going to be in 20 or 30 years, but it is going to take time. Because we're looking at lifestyles here, you as the consumer, what can you do? I mean, we are in a sense locked into a system that produces things in terrible packaging and kind of forces us to make impossible decisions. But you might think about if you've got something that you really love that comes in really horrible packaging, write to that business and tell them why you're not going to be buying their packaging anymore, because businesses are listening. And actually it is interesting, the more and more I deal with businesses, the more and more I realize that to them, what their customer thinks matters. So, for a while there, I didn't think, that consumer consumption was the most political act, but I really think it has a role these days to make good decisions and let them know that you're going to stop buying them because of the decisions they're making. Refuse, of course, that's about the ultimate reducing of waste, using less of things. It all links back to a slower lifestyle, one that where we're less in the kind of rat wheel of buying and using and discarding in a linear system. Had to do a shout out to the compost community compost guys here. As before, I mentioned how much waste we calculate how many emissions you create via waste by how much you send to landfill. So the logic here is the more that you are composting and the more you are recycling, the less you're sending to landfill, so the less emissions. And if you haven't already got your own compost in the back garden, there's great people like this, the community compost group, who will pick it up for you and turn your food waste into beautiful compost and put that back into the community. So that's wonderful. I'm not going to give a lecture on how to recycle properly. I don't think anyone needs that. But if you have any doubts, then please check out your council guidelines, because council guidelines are different every year, and they're actually continuously being updated, due to the crisis essentially we have in packaging right now. Last but not least, travel emission reduction. I found this groovy picture here on the reverse traffic pyramid, which I thought was quite cool. I haven't super analyzed it, but yeah, I think that's great. So of course, if you're shocked to learn that you've driven 20,000 kilometers this year, you might be setting a goal to at least half that this year. I think it's the average Kiwi is 10,000 kilometers. So aim to do better than the average Kiwi, because we're not very good comparatively to other countries. Talking about those co-benefits, especially for those the top half of those this pyramid, we have connected communities. If we're all walking around and cycling around, we have more time to engage with each other, smile, chat. I hate to hail back to the good old days of COVID, when I know that it was such a horrible time for some people, but I know my streets were safe, and beaming with people running, walking, smiling. It was, for me, a really quite blissful experience to see roads without cars. And of course, staycation is a big part of this time. We don't have much of a choice this year, but when flying comes back, because it will, think about not taking that next flight if it's just for the joy of it. Here's a nice outdoor bath, which I think really well represents a good staycation in New Zealand. There's lots of those outdoor baths out there. Go find one with a beautiful view, because we're pretty lucky to be where we are. Now, before I finish off this section, I did just want to acknowledge that travelling is part of our lifestyle, and you might have family that are overseas, or you might have a reason that you have to go overseas. Also, you might have family up in the North Island this year and you want to go see them for Christmas. No one should be judged for doing that. In fact, being connected with our families, especially this year, has never been so important. If you do some driving, and you want to offset that, then you can. On our website, at least you'll be kind of mitigating the impact you've had by investing in some of those great projects I've already mentioned, but we'll talk about soon. And there are little gift packs here, just this is a little commercial plug, sorry, but if you do want to gift somebody an offset, a year's driving offset, or just a ton of CO2, you can. So I hope that wasn't too just like everything that you already know. Maybe there was at least one piece of information in there that you learnt. Does anyone have anything they want to say? I'll just enlarge my screen and stop. No burning questions. Sean?
I was just going to make a comment about the news that the bread packaging, the wee plastic tags that are around the top of the bag. There's, as a result of 2 school students in Auckland, a bread company has now moved to using cardboard tags.
Yeah.
Do you have any comment about the commercial imperative? Like, all these companies will be aware of the fact that they're using products that are going to remain in the environment for half a millennia, but they proceed anyway. So do you have any comment about the consumer pressure to make them be more responsible?
Yeah.
My understanding is that they didn't do that on their own bit. They did it in response to what the students were pushing for.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts?
I do have thoughts. I think, just a bit like I said earlier, I think my experience right now and what I'm hearing is that businesses really do respond to what their consumers are saying to them. And if you can make a bit of a campaign about it, then even better. The louder, the better. For years I was on Air New Zealand's flights watching them dish out those single-use grade 6 cups. And I really kicked myself for not making a bit of a fuss about it earlier, because I should have. And I think if you see something that you can see is blatantly wrong that a company is doing, have the courage to try and make a campaign about it, or at least write them a letter or make a statement to them about why you're not going to be supporting their business anymore, or just asking them, can't you do it differently? I guess there's a bit of that kind of collaboration with business, but the more voices they have, the more likely they are to react, for sure.
Yeah, my comment about that situation is they took up the WE tags because it was a no cost to them and quite a good PR opportunity. They haven't changed the plastic bag that the bread comes in, just the tag that holds it. Yeah, and the reason for that will be that they've got an investment in a machine that puts bread in plastic bags, and that's expensive to change. And those are the it's going to be very difficult to get change if businesses aren't prepared to say, right, well, we're going to prematurely retire this piece of plant and change our manufacturing processes and things like that. So that's the challenge there. So it just comes down to making a better choice about the products you buy, because if they don't change, then they need to be changed.
Well, I agree, and I think it should be regulated. I mean, you just have to put the real cost of plastic, like the disposal of it and the cost to the ecosystem, into the bread thing, and if it turns out, I'm not convinced, but if it turns out that the paper bag is less costly to society, then the bread should be cheaper and the paper bag, and that has to be regulated. I mean, it's very clear. The guy who's running the factory and has got the investment in the machine, and of course, if you leave it without regulation, it will just go always the lowest cost. Why? And another one, and I put it in the chat, it came to mind. This has to do with packaging. Why is unpackaged food more expensive than packaged? Why? I mean, if the packaging does it cost less? I mean, does it? You see that in the supermarket, all those bins, if you're buying nuts or whatever, is always more per kilogram. And even bin, and by and large, not all of the products, but 90% of them are unpackaged more expensive than packaged. It's purely for some weird commercial war pitch that this happens. And as long as it's like this, it looks like packaging has no cost or it has negative costs. It's sort of, so companies get profit out of packaging things. So that's fundamentally wrong. And without regulation, I don't think we're going to get there anyway with voluntary actions.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Claire, it's Tord speaking. Can I make a comment?
Sure, Tord.
Different topics. I didn't hear you mention solar heating of water on the roof of buildings and solar electricity production. You didn't mention this, and I was surprised, particularly in relation to hot water in this area of the country where we have more sunlight than anywhere else.
You're right. I didn't mention that, and I probably should have. To reduce your electricity usage, of course, having your own solar panels on your roof, a great way to reduce the amount of kilowatts you're importing from an electricity provider. I mean, and we've got Ken here today, who's almost potentially an expert in this himself. Solar hot water heating, yes, and I think all of this technology is there to be harnessed. And I do apologise. Probably should have put that up there as an obvious step. I guess there's sometimes solar. I'm a little bit cautious about just putting it out there. I would always say, it's a person by person consideration, and whether, do you have the right house and the right roof facing, the right way. There's a lot of details that go into that I'm not an expert on, and where it makes financial sense and what the payback is. I think Ken potentially knows more than me on that, but definitely always something you should be starting to investigate. Yeah.
Oh, without a doubt, by 2030, which is what the carbon zero target's about, solar will be more and more affordable for homeowners, but also at a national level. Currently, the cheapest form of generation at grid scale is wind, and in about by about 2027, it'll be overtaken by solar, and the economics for batteries, so connecting batteries as an alternative to upgrading capacity and storing things, that'll be economic at electricity grid level, utility level, within 2 years. So, and depending on where you are, if you're up for investing in a whole lot of new stuff anyway, well, it's economic right now.
Yeah, if you've got a bit of cash lying around.
With electricity, if you're using more than 6 kilowatt hours per person per day, you're probably using more than you need to, and there's plenty of opportunities. The biggest, the most economic thing to do, the thing with the biggest payback in New Zealand is still energy efficiency, and how you use electricity, and when you use it in New Zealand. Our focus is on the cost of electricity and the cost of overseas. The focus is a lot more on carbon reduction.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I was trying to remember this exact quote, but I was at a conference recently, and they were talking about how 1 barrel of it was Rod Carr who was saying this, that 1 barrel of oil for $45 does the same amount of labor as one person, as 10,000 human hours, which is a person working full time for 3 years. And that's 1 barrel of oil. And I think this was the reason I bring that up, is they were talking about how really what we're going to be looking at is less energy to use in the future. So it's really going to be about us coming to terms of how to use less power, and definitely more efficiently. It's the only way forward, and still the world is going to look dramatically different to what we have right now, just simply because we will not have the same. If we're going to meet our goals and be serious about decarbonising, we just will not have the same amount of power at our fingertips like we do today. So
I always found it amusing. When we used to measure things in horsepower, we used to a third of our land production went into feeding horses, essentially, and then we grew sugar beets and things and produced oil from or petrol from biofuels, essentially. Same amount of land involved to create the same amount of energy. But that's where we've got to get back to, so the same sort of energy intensity.
And again, when coming back to almost what you were saying, Matias, when we do start properly, our economic system is pretty flawed right now, and I think we all recognise it's not accounting for the environmental externalizations. And once a carbon tax is properly, I'm using that word, but a price on carbon is put on the operations of things, it will drive innovation towards efficiency. So, we're humans, the engineers, the scientists, and the community out there, we're capable of wonderful things. We just haven't had the mandate or the incentives. We've been living in a world where cheapest is best and quickest is best, and make lots of money and chew it up and spit it out and get on to the next one. And it's just going to have to change for the better, I think. So that's really exciting. And if you don't mind, I'll just finish off this last section, and then we'll be well and truly into the, just having a chat. And again, I think it ties in nicely with what you were saying, Matthias, about externalizations. When you were talking about the packaging of food, and is that food not taking into account the external impacts on the environment? And we know that it isn't. So what if we did live in a world that was accounting for these things, and we were using, doing true environmental accounting of the externalizations, the negative impacts that business actions were having on the environment socially as well. So the reason why Ekos has this measure, offset, reduce mantra in that order is because I like to give this example. If you were an oil rig and you had an oil spill out in the ocean, you would be expected to clean that up. And the reason you would be expected to clean that up is, well, one, it would look nasty, but two, it's because of the environmental and ecological damage that people, are crying foul over. Now, carbon pollution is creating ecological and social damage. We just can't see it. So when we talk about offsetting, it is a voluntary action, but it is about taking responsibility for the impact that you've had. And that's why we really promote it, and these what we call nature-based solutions. So just in the same way that we're dealing with all these interconnected crises, some of the solutions that we can amplify to address them have interconnected co-benefits. So the one we focus on at Ekos is forests, but I want to acknowledge that forests are not going to be, in the future, the only ones that are invested in as our saving grace. We, of course, have mangroves, which need to be completely regenerated and invested in, soils, and there will be more. There will be others. Regenerative farming, being part of that puzzle. So, but yeah, this picture I have here is just to show, if we're really investing in this decarbonisation, really accounting for our environmental impacts, we can actually start having all these co-benefits that flow on from that, and really getting us to that place where we actually want to be, and valuing the things we care most about. So just in case you're not across what a voluntary forest offset is, carbon forest offset. So it's about taking responsibility, sorry, language, but you could just replace this with your lifestyle. But, taking responsibility for your carbon emissions by causing or financing an equal volume of carbon to be absorbed via the establishment of new forests and or protecting old ones. And the principle of additionality is really key here. So it means that if you didn't pay for it to happen, if you didn't finance for it to happen, that sequestration wouldn't have happened. So offsetting isn't, it is creating additional good to happen. And that's why it's called an offset, a neutralized impact. At Ekos, currently 1 tonne of CO2 is $38.50. It may be of interest to you that when I started here a few years ago, it was at $20 per tonne. And the mandate coming from the government at the moment, it's really strong. That price is just actually being held in place by a cap right now. But as soon as they lift that, they're expecting it to head on upwards. They're saying potentially $50 by next year, but I even wouldn't be surprised if it goes higher. And the essential thing here is that we do now have a cap. We have a floor on our carbon pricing, which means that it won't be vulnerable to the same kind of failures that it had under previous governments who, in a way, designed it to fail. So the emissions trading scheme is going to be a really important tool that we will be using to meet our Paris climate agreements in the future. So just going back to trees, they are a natural sink. I'm also not a forest scientist, but I wish I was, because it's just such a fascinating world. The process of photosynthesis, how they store sugars, turn them into carbon, and trees are essentially carbon vaults for as long as they're living. So in their biomass, they're storing the ton of CO2, and that can be measured and turned into a 1 tonne carbon credit. Credits are registered and held in an official account, and then when a customer offsets, these credits are permanently retired and can never be purchased again. And that is really important, because it's so that there is no double accounting happening. Another important point here is that, well, these two I'll make. One is that the reason we use certified carbon credits is because if that forest burns down, the owner of that forest now has a carbon liability. That is a liability to restore the carbon that they have already registered and sold to somebody. So that's why in our space we deal with certified carbon credits. It's not to say that if you go and plant a tree on a planting day that you haven't done a good thing. It's just in our space we need to be very official about what has happened, what additionality has been created to the climate. Because what we can't afford is for a bunch of kind of wish-washy claims to be made, I guess there's a truth to, you can plant a tree, but, unless you're there to look after that tree and help it grow to its full potential, that's only one part of the job. And just coming back to the forests as well, I said that a tree stores its carbon for as long as it lives. The idea behind a forest is that it's a living ecosystem. So yes, a tree falls over, but in its place, the light comes down and the new plant and the new tree grows up and replaces that in a natural cycle. So we're not worried about the fact that a tree falls down in a forest, because in that living ecosystem, it is going to be replenished and restored. Now that is a different scenario when you're doing a one-off tree planting on a berm or something like that. There is a reason why the ETS mandates a minimum of a hectare and a 30-metre canopy crop. It's so that the benefits of a thriving forest are actually being realised in that living system. So, yeah.
I have I'm about 6 hectares of a old English broadleaf coppice, working coppice. So what's interesting about that is that it's managed to maximize the amount of biomass that you can harvest out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the way you thin the trees out and let the new ones shoot off the cut down stump and so on, they bolt really fast, and you get all sorts of different biomass products out of it. That really amps up the amount of carbon you're sequestering, and the whole how you plant out properties and so on. So the other interesting thing is it's on a dry land farming operation. So the trees are also providing fodder and dry times and things like that. So all just resource management. Now they've been managing coppices in the UK since William the Conqueror built New Forest, and just a in Australia, I mean, they've been managing, the Aborigines have been managing their forests for even longer. There's a lot of things in New Zealand that we could focus on, just far better water management, far better resource management, including water is probably our biggest issue. We don't have such a problem with electricity, but we certainly are not managing the other resources as efficiently as we could. And big plantings of pine forests, not really the best way to maximise the benefits to the land and the benefits to the environment, and what we could get in terms of carbon sinking.
Yeah, no, totally.
It's the same with the way we manage.
Agree.
How far is the research going on getting credits for blue carbon?
Yes, blue carbon, that was the one I didn't mention earlier. Yeah, I think there's a lot of energy being pushed in that space. I think New Zealand will try and be a pioneer in that, I hope, given our opportunity. So yeah, but the short answer is that it's not available yet, and there are no credits that you could buy, blue carbon credits out there, but that they're working on it. And I'd say like people like the Core Forum, they would know quite a lot about that right now and what's going on. The seaweed kind of drawdown as well, definitely been invested in. Mangroves, like I mentioned, that some work's going on in that space in the North Island. So yeah, I think you touched on something before, Ken, as well, is we want to make sure, like, if you remember my bathtub scenario, even if we got to zero tomorrow, which we're not going to do, we're going to need to invest in these things. We actually need to restore the nature that we've degraded over time. So it is a great opportunity for us to hit so many things all at once. So that's why when we talk about forest projects in the Ekos supply chain, these are only restorative carbon forest projects that deliver multiple co-benefits. So habitat for biodiversity, water quality, reduced soil erosion, and all of that other good stuff that happens in healthy, diverse, thriving forests. So
putting carbon back into our soil without using fertilizers and using biomass that we're growing, it's just a double hit.
Yeah, that's right.
Can I just pick up on the blue carbon again?
Yes.
You say it's coming. Are you talking about 6 months, a year, or 5 years, 10 years?
I mean, I wouldn't be giving you an accurate like I feel like it's not. I feel like it's a few years away at least, and it's just being
lobby for. I mean,
Yeah, it's this. To be honest, the little bit that I know about this is that there's a huge amount of they need to prove the gain that is happening from the restoration. So let's just use the kelp example. They need to prove the amount of carbon that's being stored by the kelp when it sinks down to the bottom of the ocean. But it probably requires a few longitudinal studies to see whether that's then having any on crossover, carry on impacts in the environment, right? Because you want to make sure you're not creating another environmental problem. So there's probably certain tests and checks going on right now. I imagine they're throwing the books at it and they're trying to prove its gain, prove that it's not environmentally destructive. I know one young lad who's doing his thesis on it right now. People are looking into it. And I think it's a bit, if COVID's taught us anything, if we actually put our forces into it, all collaborate, we can get things done in a far shorter time frame than what has previously been achieved. So I think if we really double down on this and focus, there's no reason we can't shorten the time frame of getting this methodology verification happening. I imagine in the rush to decarbonize, we're going to make mistakes. And I think that's going to be part of it, because we have left ourselves no room to trial things properly and test that there aren't environmental consequences. So the reason, again, we like trees is we know how to plant a good, healthy forest. And we know that, if it is a healthy forest, then it is going to have all these co-benefits. There's not too much of a risk there. So this is just our game, but definitely acknowledging all those other great nature-based solutions that are going to need to be ramped up as well.
Our focus for the oceans, 95% of New Zealand's resources are in the ocean. And 70% of the planet's covered in ocean. That's where we should be focusing on, where we produce food rather than just take the wild stock. And that would really reduce our food production costs and stop all this burning down forests and growing palm oil and whatever we're doing to keep the world ticking over. It's that we're just not using the things that they are, you know.
Can I clarify, Claire, with you? So is Ekos in the business of basically connecting businesses and private people to a emissions trading scheme, and basically they're paying $40 and it goes into a bank, and that's all you're doing. You're not actually planting trees. So, and then somebody comes along, just correct me if I'm wrong, and then somebody comes along and say, oh, I've got a piece of land, I'm going to plant these things, and then I'm collecting the credit. Is that your business model?
I'll just repeat it back to you in my own words, is that so we would, yes, we connect businesses or private people with good restorative carbon forest projects. The projects that we have are a mixture of either planting projects or protection projects. So there's a mixture in there in our supply chain. So sometimes for some of our projects, it's about protecting rainforest from being logged, and it's that way that we create an additionality impact. In other cases, it is a pure planting project where a landowner has to plant that forest, grow that forest, and issues credits from that forest, which is what you are then purchasing. But remember,
it is a bank of some sort. So I mean, if 100,000 New Zealanders now sort of buying 10 tons of carbon each, then you're having, you know, $1 million or something lying around, and then it may take quite a while before you find the project to connect it to. So it is in effect a bank. It's in effect a bank.
Not quite.
Because I mean the demand and supply will not always be in sync, right?
Yes, I see what you're saying, but no, it's not quite right. It's more like so what you're explaining, that's more like a funding model where, like, so if you got a grant to do a planting project, they're going to give you $500,000 to go and plant a forest. Then you go and plant that forest, and in a sense, they're hoping that they get that forest and those credits. But in this case, the credits already have to exist. So when you purchase that credit from me, it is already held in a registry, as in it has already happened. It's been measured. We call them vintages, a bit like, you know, you get vintages of wine. So in 2019, the Rarako project in Southland issued 4,000 credits. So that's a measured growth or additionality that is now held in a bank account, and then when you buy it, it is cancelled out, no longer available. So it's not a bank, it's the opposite. Yeah.
Good. But it can be like, I mean, the fact that the price is going up means it's becoming more difficult to find land and to actually realize these projects, which is a good sign. I mean, high carbon prices are what we all want, but it's also an indication of what is that, a zero-sum game? Has anyone done the figures, like if we cleared out and it links on to Ken's project, like if the land is enough New Zealand-wide or worldwide to decarbonize what we currently produce every day. Number one is 3 components. Number 2 is to allow for growth, like all the councils, everybody is talking about growth all the time. So 2.5% growth means by 2050, we will have twice as many people on the planet, or in Nelson or everywhere. Yeah, just don't forget that. We're doubling in 30 years. We have twice as big a problem then. And thirdly, we want to go backwards, like you wanted to go back down from 425 to 350. So to allow for all these carbon gains, how much land do we need?
It's a great question. I don't have the quick answer for you, although I feel like there's been a few different studies where, you know, they've analysed scenarios. All I can say, and I'm sorry if I didn't say it earlier, in terms of the science-based, like the IPCC came out in 2018 after the Paris Climate Agreement and said, for us to actually do this, to meet the 1.5 degree target, we're going to have to reduce our emissions by 40% globally, and then get to net zero by 2050. So part of what you're saying is, to answer your question, is, you know, we're going to have to reduce our emissions. There's no way we could carbon offset our way out of this. Potentially no matter what the, you know, even if we did get to that point of regenerative farming, you know, we've got a whole lot of things to manage in this space, like you said, growing populations, you know, all of those things. So it's really about the decarbonisation of our energy systems and our transport. So using all those innovations that are possible if they were given the mandate, economic and political mandate, and then ramping up not just trees, because as you say, there's no way we can't cover all our land in trees. There was a quite famous study that was done by someone in Sweden, I think it was last year, and I just can't think of the numbers off the top of my head, but they plotted all the land that wasn't going to be used by humans and imagined if they were all planted out in trees. And it was a real significant offset. I think it was maybe 40%, but I'm really sorry, I can't say exactly. But it wasn't 100%. But you can imagine if we really get to this point of incentivizing regenerative agriculture, which we need to do anyway, we only have 6 harvests left using our industrial model. You know, investing in regenerative agriculture, investing in forests, reducing the size of our economies, moving to circular economy models. I think all of the things you said are going to need to happen, and that's what I mean by this whole we have to do everything and we have to do it now. The world is not going to look the same by hopefully not by 2030. But
can I make a comment there? It's Tord.
Hi, Tord.
Hi there. New Zealand has 27 million hectares of land, and for each hectare, if you plant native forests on it, according to the Ministry for the Environment, it absorbs about 10 tons of carbon equivalents per year. And we are emitting from all of our activities, mainly from agriculture, 80 million tons per year. That means that if we planted trees on 8 million hectares, which is about 30% of the land in the country, then we could absorb all the carbon that we emit from our agriculture and other activities.
Today.
So actually it is not all the land in the country, it's 30%. Now obviously that's a bit impractical, and a much more powerful way of reducing the carbon emissions is to deal with agriculture. But it has to be done in a collective way and in an organized way, so that the farmers don't feel that they are being demonized, you know. But I'm pretty sure that there is an enormous amount of hectares of land which is actually not very economically used for sheep and cows. And that should be the focus of at least part of our activities to reduce carbon in the air, you know. And it's the problem, as you said, offsetting should not be a dirty word, but if offsetting is promoted very much as a way for those who are in industry and emitting lots of carbon, that they can continue to emit their carbon because they offset, it's seen as a negative thing. But in fact, we actually absolutely have to use this natural absorption process as well as the reduction of our emissions. And that's not always made clear.
Yeah, thank you, Tord.
I think the focus needs to be on reducing emissions, because sure, we've got enough land to mitigate our production and so on, but you know, we're using you know, multiple times more. Our footprint's huge compared to, say, someone in China. If we're not prepared to reduce our use of carbon and expect them and allow them to increase theirs to what we're using, well, you know, we've overdone the world's budget by about a factor of 3. So
agree.
You know, we need to deal with one, getting our consumption down to something that's reasonable, that the whole world can cope with, and two, picking up some of the load of the other countries that are going to have growth and need the same living standards and all those sorts of things. So it's managing that on a global basis, and big changes required. You know, I just don't know why we import cars. End of story.
We won't in the future, trust me. But anyway, we've got to wait for that future to come. Cool. So I'm just totally aware of the time's getting close, and I don't want to push on till, like, you know, all hours of the night. But I think we all could probably hang out here and chat and philosophize about this. You know, I really, you know, and I guess I just want to summarize by saying there definitely emission reductions are so important and have to be part of what we're doing. I just also want to say the nature-based solutions is also just so important, you know, and for more reasons than just carbon. You know, I think we all want to look outside and see forests on our landscapes, have birds flying around, have clean water, have soil, and that's the kind of things that if we do nature-based solutions well, we can be investing in all of that other good stuff and the stuff that really means a lot to us. So it's just part of the toolkit that we're going to have to use to get ourselves into this future that where we want to end. So thanks for coming along tonight and bearing with me. Sorry, a few of my slides were a little bit not updated there. I've just come back from giving a few zero carbon presentations to different regions. So just thanks for hanging out with me this evening. And if you have any particular follow-up questions, so obviously we didn't get to touch on either the carbon light or the school calculation piece. So maybe that's you know, a workshop for the new year. But I encourage you to get along to our website and just have a little look yourselves. The overall idea there of the carbon light business calculator is that it is just, again, something you can use online. It's automated. It's slightly low resolution. So, well, it is low resolution, as in it's not an ISO standard measurement. But if you've got a community organisation, it might be perfect for them, because that means that there's no upfront costs that you're going to have to pay to go through that measurement. I say that actually, sorry, there is a $100 admin fee, and that goes into the offsetting piece. But anyway, so thank you. Jessie, anything you'd like to round off and say?
Thank you so much, Claire, for your time this evening. I'm sure we've all taken some really valuable gems of information from that. And I was just going through and doing my calculator and I'm horrified at the numbers. I'm not going to share them all with you. So it comes from trying to commute to Christchurch to visit friends and family. But yeah, I'm going to be putting on my wish list for Christmas, offsetting that. So that's awesome. If we could all just like sort of show our appreciation for Claire with a little wee hand wiggle there. Closest thing to applause on Zoom.
Thank you. Yeah. And
Claire, if you wanted to share the slides with me, I can then send them out to everyone who participated today.
No problem.
And yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Hey, thank you. Wishing you all lovely evenings and ka kite.